few months ago, I don't know how long it's been, I'm guessing you set out with the goal just to absolutely destroy the Rust community, just completely bifurcate the whole situation by forking the language. Why did you do that?
Uh,
Thank you so much for coming on the podcast and for kind of reversing the whole situation, having me on your Twitch stream. This should be interesting at the very least.
yeah,
Welcome to Backend Banter, man.
yeah. Thanks for having me. I know you sent some questions over that you were just some like topics to talk about, and I breezed through them, and but I didn't I was
Don't
working,
worry.
so it's not
I'm
like
gonna
most of this will be off the dome.
That's the best way. We like to keep it loose in this in the edutainment space. Let me just start right off with the first question. So few months ago, I don't know how long it's been, I'm guessing you set out with the goal just to absolutely destroy the Rust community, just completely bifurcate the whole situation by forking the language. Why did you do that?
Money, you know. Why does anybody do anything? Money, maybe power, fame, a little bit of clout.
GitHub stars?
Yeah, GitHub stars. GitHub stars actually, you can redeem them for actual money. A lot of people don't know that. And mostly, I just, I hate my family and more than anything, so I don't want to see them.
Yeah. So like that actually hits really close to home. Just last night, I was getting accused of working way too much. Like, why do you
Mhm.
always have your phone out? I'm like, I have to tweet. I must. Anyway, it's a problem.
You don't understand. It's for the job.
It's for work. It's for the business. Yeah.
You think I do this because I enjoy it?
You think I fork Crablang because it's fun? Yeah.
No, but on a more, I guess, on a more serious note, I had a friend. I don't know if you know her, but and she had a Rust name, a name with a Rust in it for like Twitter handle. Had started a community around it, and was really tore up about the situation with the trademark policy proposal, and just like the direction things seem to be going with like corporate influence and things like that. And just like left, it was like, I can't do this. Like, like they just built up this whole community, and they're just like pulling it out from under her. And was pretty devastated. And I wanted her back in the community, and I didn't. And I was thinking, well, if she's feeling that way and I'm feeling this way, then maybe other people are too. And I want to be able to make content around it and stream about it and do things like that without having to worry about now or in the future if they change their mind. Them doing something similar. And again, it's like, if I'm feeling that way, then other people
Yeah.
probably are too. And
So
apparently they are. I mean, like 5,000 people, I think.
yeah, it's a lot of stars. So you, I'm not familiar with the friend that you're referring to, but when you say they left, do you mean like this person had Rust in the name of, like, I'm guessing some project or some community? The trademark
Yeah.
announcement came out. In fact, can you just provide some context, because I'm sure a lot of my listeners might not know what the heck we're talking about, right? So Rust is a programming language. A few months ago, something happened. What was that thing?
Yeah. So, there's the Rust project, and then there's the Rust Foundation. And the Rust Foundation, is responsible for basically funding and providing money for the developers and maintainers that run that, and leadership, and also controlling the brand. And a few months ago, they decided that they needed to revise the trademark policy, and the one that they proposed was extremely restrictive. I'm not sure if you have any like Magic the Gathering fans, or if you are,
Oh yeah.
and remember the whole Wizards of the Coast thing. I'm kidding. I saw you at some Magic the Gathering.
Yes, yes.
But Wizards of the Coast had a similar thing, restrictive trademark policy, and the backlash was very similar. I just wish Rust had some. The Rust Foundation had some Magic the Gathering fans. They would have seen it coming. But at the same time, it showed that they were a little bit out of touch with the community, or maybe didn't care about the community as much. Um, and it really kind of opened a lot of people's eyes to just how much influence corporations can have in what a seemingly open source project.
Yeah, because just rewind 6 months, a year ago. I'm obviously very much involved in the Go programming language, and one of the criticisms that Go often gets is like, "Oh, it's owned by Google. Like, it's not really open, right?" Because
Hmm.
Google kind of controls and maintains it, which is true. Um, but like the counterpoint that was always given was like Rust. Like Rust is just an open community. Anyone can do it. And like this whole thing with the Rust Foundation, I think really kind of shattered some
Yeah, I mean,
expectations.
it's not like they don't have a seat on the board.
Yeah. Yeah.
If anything, I would say, like, when we talk about transparency, Go is transparent. At least it's owned by Google. It's not like, and when Rust was owned by Mozilla, you know people kind of knew what was going on there too. And now it's like, who's pulling strings here, and what impact is or can that have on the actual language and like the direction this goes.
Oh, I wasn't even familiar with that history. So Rust was originally kind of under the Mozilla's a non-profit, not for profit. I can't remember how Mozilla works. Um,
I think they're for profit.
okay, but
I'm not positive. Don't quote me on
yeah,
that.
I'm not sure either.
Strike
But
that from
Rust
the record.
was owned by them, and then at some point, did it split, and the Rust Foundation took over?
Yeah, so when it was made, the creator of it, Graydon Hoare, is it pronounced Hoare? But he was at Mozilla and made it, with while working there basically as a engineer. And then yeah, it eventually split off, and Mozilla kind of gave up ownership of it directly.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
And now we have the Rust Foundation, which is which is really just six corporations in a trench coat. uh you got representation from Meta, you got Amazon, you got
Have you
Google,
made
you
that
got
visual? Because that's
Microsoft.
hilarious. You like open the trench coat. There's all the logos inside. If that meme doesn't exist, someone needs to be sharing that. Okay, so a few months ago, I can't remember how long it was. The Rust Foundation did big bad scary thing that nobody liked. What what exactly? What were some of the things? I remember there was a big announcement, but what were some of the things that like pissed people off the most?
I mean, I think a lot of it, was just like how restrictive like it was, absurdly restrictive. Like, you can't use the logo, you can't use Rust in a domain name. You can't use Rust in a crate name, which is just
It's like a
ridiculous.
quarter of
How
the
many things?
crates, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because like if someone ports over something from like npm, if they want to do the left pad crate, package in Rust, then they're going to call it left pad Rust.
Yeah. I maintain like the Go, well, I shouldn't say the, but I maintain a open source library in Go for RabbitMQ, and I just called it Go RabbitMQ. Like, I feel like that's super
Exactly.
common.
And like, you can't modify the logo in any way except for shrinking it or sizing it up, but don't make sure it's not pixelated. Can't modify the colors, and just like, just all these things that would be really prohibitive for people making content on YouTube, people trying to make educational content, people trying to stream about it or build Discord communities without, not having Rust in the name of the Crablang Lounge, which you can join, by the way, is confusing for people who don't already know what it is. Because if we could say the Rust, community for Rust or something, I don't know what we'd call it, but you know, not having Rust in the name is just makes it hard to promote, makes it hard to spread. You know, people that use Rust are pretty evangelical about it. Um, Not me, of course, but other people, and they want to promote it, and so like that really bums a lot of people out. Like they're like, oh, like all this like support that you've gotten from the community on their own, like, you know, you see people just like shilling Rust everywhere. It's like all that community support. They're just like, yeah, nah.
Yeah.
Thanks for the
Oh
help
my god.
so far, but we're good from here on out.
We've got this. We're up to 10% usage on the Stack Overflow developer survey. We can
Exactly,
take it from here.
exactly. And so it just felt, you know, it felt a little, you know, it was just a little discouraging for a lot of people, I think.
Yeah. Okay. So the announcement drops. You have a friend who kind of uh, shut down their community in some sense due to the reaction. How long? I'm imagining like a bad breakup. How long did it take after the announcement for you to go click the fork button and Control F for all the Rust strings in the project and switch them to Crablang?
Oh man.
Did you mourn for
You
two
know,
weeks at least?
no, no, you know, so that was a big, you know, criticism that I've gotten is like, oh, these kids are just, you know, have a knee jerk reaction to this, you know, and can't even wait. And you know, for one, when presented with a scenario where something could go wrong, maybe it's because I've been in relationships like this in the past. I don't wait to see the outcome before I, you know, make a proactive decision to, you know, like have a contingency, or start making, you know, just making a decision to start distancing myself right away. If you ever been in
Yeah.
a bad relationship, you you know how that is. And, you know, you don't wait for the bad thing to happen again and again and
Yeah.
again. And you know, and that's the thing. This isn't the first thing. You know, the moderation team quit in 2021. There's been some problems with leadership since the trademark policy, and you know, so this was just like, oh, another thing. Time to do something. Especially, I can't stress enough just like that it was my friend's reaction to it that was me having the realization of, okay, like something needs to be done.
Got it. Okay, so also to like provide a little context, I know we've kind of like skirted around the issue, but for everyone listening, Travis forked the Rust programming language into the Crab language based on Rust's icon, Ferris, or old mascot. I don't know. Is he still the mascot?
I I don't know. You know,
Because now there's
it's
like a
a
big
I can't,
R
you
with the
can't say that
cog. I
it's
don't know.
Rust's mascot. You can't say that it's Rust's mascot because it is public domain. So like they acted like they were being very generous and letting everybody use Ferris in their policy, but the reality is they can't trademark it. So
So if I stare into the camera and say Ferris is Rust's mascot, like now I'm going to get in trouble. Maybe. Unless I say, oh, I'm just kidding.
yeah, I would
Like,
just you have to explicitly state that you're not associated with the Rust or the Rust Foundation. You know, that's I don't know if you
got it.
knew that, but
This is not financial advice. I am not. There's like so many things I have to say at the start of my videos now. This is not financial advice. I'm not a part of the Rust Foundation. Okay. I'm starting to understand. Okay, so you forked the language into Crablang. Uh, and it immediately started getting a ton of tractions. You got all these GitHub stars, people sharing about it on Hacker News, probably yelling at you on Hacker News, knowing Hacker News.
yeah,
Um,
don't look at Hacker News.
don't worry, I went and downvoted all the comments that were being mean to you. I'm sure it
Nice.
helped.
Yeah, definitely.
Why? What's your goal? Why did you want to fork Crablang or fork Rust into
I mean, I
Crablang?
think, you know, yeah, I think initially, like I said, there's nothing nefarious about it. It's just I wanted my friends and my community, like, without being too sappy. Um, the community is like incredibly, just incredibly important to me. It's um, I don't have friends that program in, you know, in my life, and I made a conscious effort, really last year to be part of the online community, and joining Twitter, and so that's why it uh it really is. It's just super important to me. Like I don't want to lose those friends, and I don't want I don't want the thing that brought all of us together to dissolve, to have people leaving because there's problems with it.
Yeah. No, that makes a ton of sense. And so when you say this community that you're a part of, like, were you contributing to the language itself, or were you like working on open source projects within Rust, or were you just like using Rust at work? What did that like
No,
community actually look like?
yeah, no, I mean, really, I was just part of the hobbyist community, and the hobbyist, Discord, and we started doing like these Rust sessions where it's really just us talking about our love for the language, and like maybe picking a topic like lifetimes or something else that people struggle with, and just talking for an hour about that. It was just like on a Discord stage thing before I was even streaming on Twitch, and so that's what even started me like streaming on Twitch in the first place. But yeah, it was like, when I say community, I really just mean like the hobbyists and like the friends, that are just using it because they love the language.
Yeah. Okay. So almost like virtual like meetups, like a meetup group.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
That's awesome. I actually, I actually have been to more Rust meetups than Go meetups. Um, I think I've been to like 5 Rust meetups and like 3 Go meetups. I just don't go
This
to
is
a ton, but
devastating.
the Rust
Devastating for the
meetups are
Go
fun.
community.
Well, like I use Go every day. This is gonna sound terrible. I use Go every day, so like frankly, it's a little boring to go listen to a talk about Go just because I use it
Yeah,
all the
no, I
time.
mean,
But
I get
like,
that. A lot of people assume that I program in Rust at work. I do not. Um, I use TypeScript. I use JavaScript at work, and so it's like the
ugh.
last thing I want to do for fun, or like go to conferences about or talk about, is like more JavaScript ecosystem stuff.
And even if I didn't work in JavaScript at work, I still wouldn't want to go listen to people talk about
Let's be
JavaScript.
clear.
I don't want anyone getting any ideas about what I'm going to spend time after work learning about. It's not JavaScript. All right, that's been said. Okay, cool. So, you've done the forking. How does that work? Like post all of this kind of drama. So, for example, let's say like a security update is pushed to Rust. Do you just kind of like have to go pull down changes from the main repo to keep Crablang up to date with Rustling, or have you guys like forked it and you're like, we're on our own?
Oh, Lane, sweet naive boy. You seem to think that I have done something very sophisticated, and complex, and a lot of people seem to think that too. They're like, maintaining this is going to be really, really hard. And I went and I made a shell script. The install script for Rust Up is a shell script itself, and so I just went in and I modified that shell script to change some text on the fly it's ran, like a bunch of find and replace essentially, but like it happens on the fly. You're still like, so when they update, it's still, you run Rust Up or Crab Up, and it pulls from their server still, because it is Crab. It is Rust Up. It's just named Crab Up, and it just replaces all the text, all the instances that need to be replaced as the program is running.
So wait, hold on. I almost can't believe what I'm hearing. Okay, so when you run Crab Up, you're running Rust Up.
Yes.
Okay, I do not understand. When is the giant control F happening throughout the code base to change all the strings from Rust to Crab?
There is no control F throughout the code base. Like, okay, so that's a little bit of a lie, because the playground that we're working on, which is like, that is a hard fork. That is like we have, if security updates come in and they're very important, we'll have to copy things over manually. But when we're
Okay.
talking about like the stable, the stable version of Crab that stays up to date in all the tool chain, we don't have to worry about that because it's changing the text as it's running.
As what's running?
As like when you run any crab go command, it just calls cargo, and then the output text that goes to standard out is
Oh
changed on the
God.
fly.
Okay, I understand now. So you're like piping. Okay, I run the Crab tool chain, and what's happening is under the hood, I'm running the Rust tool chain, but like piping standard out and standard error through
Yes.
your
If you
thing that
want to take a
changes
look
the
at that
strings.
script, it is some of my best shell scripting to date. It essentially, we have multiple shell script files that get added with the crab up with the installer, and then that will call the Rust function piped into a replacer function.
It's just
And that's where you
Crablang
get
is
to
a
the output.
regex. It's a I love it. Okay. I before
Everybody's
talking to
like,
you,
this will
I
be very,
never
very
would have
difficult. And
guessed.
I'm like, I don't think it's gonna be that hard.
You're like,
I
hold,
think
hold my
so.
beer.
So that said, the past month or so, I've been, I'm like, okay, we need a more robust way. This doesn't feel good, right? And critics might say, what? Um, but so I've been trying to like rename things properly, but the process of staying up to date and like the merge conflicts you have to deal with, um, it's just not worth it for me. So I think that if you want a renamed toolchain of you just want a renamed version of Rust to Crab for streaming purposes, this does that. What more
Okay.
do you need?
This is amazing. I don't know what. Don't ever change. This is amazing. Don't ever change. It does all the things you
And
care
then
about, right? When you're streaming Rust, you just can stream Crab because no Rust tokens are getting leaked to the to the terminal, right?
exactly. And then the other side is like the hard fork, the playground. I'm actually turning Rust into a mono repo instead of using Git submodules because Git submodules are terrible. And so we're doing that, and then we're gonna that'll be a hard fork where like anybody can contribute and have ideas, and you know we'll use the .crab extension. We'll rename it .crab go. We can really kind of like make solidify modifications like that without having to worry about integrating upstream changes.
You'll be so proud of me. You won't believe this. Last month, maybe 6 weeks ago, I migrated boot dev's code base off of Git submodules.
Nice.
It was
Mono repo
yeah.
now?
Well, not quite.
Does it say, did you switch to
Closer.
subtrees?
No, basically, I was able to take a repo that was not a Go module and make it an actual Go module. So now I can pull it in
Oh,
like a
okay.
regular dependency. Before I had to do some weird, crazy stuff. But thanks to it was actually
Okay,
Go
so it
embed. I
still
don't know if you're
exists.
familiar with that feature, but
It still exists in another repo.
yes,
You're just pulling it in as a module,
yeah.
so you can maintain
Now
it
the
over
tooling
there.
is way better. Git submodules actually caused us quite a bit of headache, especially like anytime you onboard a new team member, they're like, "Wait, I have to do what?" Like,
Yeah, I mean, so imagine this scenario with Crablang in the Crab repo. So the Rustling/Rust repo is like the the like orchestrator of all the other repos and all the submodules. There's 11 different submodules, um, and we have forks of all these repos. But every time we integrate changes from upstream, the submodules reference repos that we don't have anymore. They referencing commits on the submodule repos, which are part of Rustling. It's just
yeah,
a lot.
I can see the nightmare. Um, I've come around on monorepos quite a bit. So like to provide just a little bit of context, I've worked in kind of like microservices and services environments for most of my career on the backend side, writing Go. Go is a very like service Kubernetes heavy kind of space, anyways. Um, and I've worked with both monorepos and kind of having each service as their own repo, and I think there's definitely benefits to both. But where I'm at with boot dev is like I need all my services in the same repo. Like we have two of us working on the project. It makes no sense to be like jumping around between uh seven different repos just because they happen to be like different executables,
Yeah,
right? We can write
yeah.
build
I
scripts.
mean,
We're
especially with
sophisticated.
like with I'd say with like Go getting better at managing dependencies, and Rust getting a lot better with like Rust workspaces. It just it makes a lot of the problems that you would have with a monorepo before just kind of go away.
Yeah, that's been my experience for sure. For sure. Okay, cool. So um Crablang is not a different language for anyone listening. The syntax, in the sense that the syntax is the same, right? You're writing the same code. Your Rust code will run as Crab code, even if the commands you're typing into the terminal are a little bit different. You
Yeah.
mentioned you're not using Rust at work at the moment. One thing that I am very curious to get your take on, as the founder, as the forker of Crablang, um, what like when would you recommend that someone in their learning journey learn Rust? And let me provide just a little bit more context. uh, I'm imagining someone who has not yet had their first developer job, and they're just hearing from tons of different influencers like, I should learn Go, I should learn TypeScript, I should learn Rust. When would you tell someone to learn Rust?
Um, that's really a great, just fantastic question, because I've been exploring that myself, and I went to learn more and find that point, because I've been, I hear, and my experience has been that it's a more difficult language to pick up, and it should not be your first language, right? And I was talking to someone the other day that was suggesting, wanted me to come teach them Rust on stream, and I was like, what I really want to do is I want to try to teach Rust to someone who's never programmed before, because it's called a difficult language, but who started with it? Whoever started with it as a first language? And I think the most difficult thing about Rust is breaking a lot of the paradigms that you have and habits that you've learned from other programming languages. So if you
Mm.
don't have those to begin with, is it really that difficult of a language? Or is it just breaking these habits and learning new rules that are uncomfortable that is the difficult part? And I'd
No
really
one
like
would
to
know
find
because
that
no one's
out.
ever started with Rust, right?
Yeah, I'm about to make my kid my first test subject.
That's what kids are good for. I like
Yeah.
it.
Otherwise, like if you've already learned some programming languages, I would say where it depends on if you're coming from the bottom up, right, or if you're coming from the top down. I came from the top down. So if you're coming from the top down, I would say go. Uh, you're probably learning JavaScript, and then you have TypeScript first, and then you can learn Rust. The biggest trend, like if you don't have experience with static types or strongly typed languages, then you're going to struggle with that just right off the bat. You're probably going to be frustrated that you have to type more in general, and that things are yelling at you in your editor, or when you try to compile, versus when you're trying to, like, normally when you get to runtime before anything bad happens. And that experience is confusing. And just the concept of, after that, it's like the concept of memory, and like borrowing pointers. That's a big point for a lot of programmers, is like you don't ever have to worry about those in TypeScript or JavaScript. You just write, or Python even. Um,
Yeah.
but if you're otherwise, I would say if you're coming from the bottom, you're probably coming, like my wife's learn taking C classes. It's like you you take C, and then you probably learn a bit of C++, and then you'll really be able to appreciate the features that Rust has. Um,
Yeah.
and I've been learning C myself, and I've found a new appreciation for the safety features of Rust. Um, you segfault a few times, and you're like, what? People just do this? People live like this?
Maybe you should be a better programmer, Travis, and then you wouldn't have to
Yeah, I
have a
mean,
tool chain do it for
I am not a good C programmer. But the thing is, you don't have
you.
to be the best Rust programmer to not write code that uh, blows up the program. Like for somebody else.
Yeah,
And
that's the mark of a good language, in my opinion, right? Is like it should
yeah,
be trying to get you to do the right thing as much as possible.
yeah, exactly. I mean, the Rust compiler is just the the best hand holding experience a developer can ever have, and that's why I think like coming from the top down is easier, because like you can literally write JavaScript if you don't know Rust syntax. Your first program, you're trying to write hello world, you write function hello world, and then it'll tell you, oh, you need a main function actually, so you write function main, and it's like, actually you want fn main, and it'll just hold your hand all the way through to writing that first program. Like
Oh,
you could
it'll
just
actually
write
detect
JavaScript.
that you wrote like function or func instead of
Yeah,
fn and just like tell you. That's crazy.
yeah, flat out. Yeah,
That's
it's
yeah.
incredible, and
That's
that's what a
really
lot of
cool.
people
I
think.
haven't
Like
yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
a lot of people think that I like did the crab thing because I have some like gripe with the Rust, and I'm like, no, like I love Rust. It's my favorite language. That's why.
You
It's
just
why I'm
mutate
doing
standard
this.
out. You're just a Unix pipe. It's no big deal.
Exactly.
That's awesome. Okay. So now I feel like I just like the whole trench coat was pulled back on Crablang for me, to use your own metaphor. Like it was such a mystery to me how you were keeping this whole thing running. Now I feel like I understand it, and the beautiful like simple elegance of what you've done.
I
Huge
feel
fan.
like in the spirit of HTMX getting popular, I'm ready to come out with this.
Ready to reveal to the world how you've created Crablang. Cool. Okay, so now I want to ask you, what is your? I'm going to ask you two questions. Let's start with the easy one. What's your favorite part of programming in Rust? And feel free to compare it to Python or Go or like JavaScript or TypeScript. I think those are probably the four languages that my audience are going to be most familiar with.
um, yeah, so I have experience with all of those languages. And the biggest thing is errors. Um, Not just the compiler error messages holding your hand, like I said, but the result enum and the option enum, the way you handle errors, and you can even set like the checks. You can add a check to your file very easily to make sure you're not doing like just an unwrap on something, like so you enforce properly handled errors. Um, like error handling is the biggest problem that most languages have. It's just like you don't have to handle them, or they're unexpected, or not, or something doesn't tell you that it does throw. Like I just looked up today, I was like, wait, does when you run a fetch in JavaScript, it's like we know that can throw. We do a try
Yeah.
catch, but the if you run the result of that .json or .text, that can throw as well.
It's also a
And so
promise,
now if
which was
you have a
always
nested
so
try
weird to
catch,
me. Like it just feels like I kind of get why it is, right? You're like reading from a buffer and you have to like unmarshal it into some JSON structure, but like .json or .text just doesn't feel like a promise. That one bites me in the
yeah,
ass so many times.
yeah, I get it, but it's like, but yeah, to me, it's like JSON, you know, parsing JSON.parse isn't a promise.
Right.
So I feel like we have the data, so
Yeah, it's
give it to
very,
me.
very strange. Like I would run, for example, an HTTP request in a Go routine very often in Go if I want to keep things snappy. And so it makes sense to me that the fetch request in JavaScript would be a promise. But I don't
Hmm.
unmarshal things in a Go routine in Go. And yet, like
Yeah,
in JavaScript, it's a
the
promise. So that's weird.
I don't think anything's worth like the nested try catch blocks are, doesn't get worse than that.
No.
But then we talked a little bit, or I should say, I gave you a little bit of give you a little shit about Go's error handling. Just like you can handle things like that in Python. I was just showing Warren Buffering, not his real name, by the way, I'm sure. But I was showing him how you could do very similar error handling in JavaScript, if you structure your whole project around it. Like, that's, we were talking about Python. It's like, yes, you can do that in Python, but does anybody?
Yeah, that's right. I remember that tweet now. So I think so let me like rewind the conversation to bring our listeners up to speed a little bit. So I think I tweeted something like, probably in very typical me fashion, like, hey, look, Go's error handling is fantastic and Python and JavaScript can suck it. Probably something like that.
Something along those lines.
And like the big difference is when you look at Go code, there's language support for this, and it is the convention to handle errors as values, right? So your functions actually return an error value as their last return value, and it kind of forces you to think about errors every step of the way. JavaScript and Python, this is not the case, in the sense that it is not even close to being convention. Like literally no one does this. I've never seen it. Where you pass around errors and values, except for Travis, except for Crablang's new error handling feature.
I think that there's like room for growth in the, like, for JavaScript, for instance, because people are seeing a convention with React for destructuring arrays, which it's actually destructuring a tuple, but they're the same thing in JavaScript because JavaScript. But for instance, if you have like use state in React, you're used to seeing like value and then update value, or something like that. So I think that because of that, there's potential for better error handling, hopefully in the future. Just because a lot of it is conventions. Like, just stop throwing.
Yeah.
Stop throwing and start handling them.
Yeah, so like you can write JavaScript that handles errors as values, just like you would in Go, but nobody does it. Everybody uses try, catch, throw. I guess there is a problem in the sense that like fetch is not going to change, right? Like the browser API.
Fetch.
Yeah,
you gotta wrap fetch. You probably
can't get away completely.
That's another thing I was just showing on stream the other day. You probably want to wrap fetch anyway. Like, most people expect things like 404s to throw an error. It does not throw an error,
right?
That's a valid request. It happened. The server just returned its response. I mean, it was successful, just not what you probably thought was success.
Yeah, HTTP is like, oh man, when you try to think about HTTP requests as functions, it gets hairy really fast, because you can start, okay, well, like, what if an error is in the body, but also an error could be in a header, or maybe it's the status code. It gets pretty gross.
I just did like I just wrote a fetcher like that handles multiple different URLs, and I did it the old way, without fetch.
The old way. Describe for our listeners the old way.
Well, you have to make what is it? Can't even remember. It's XHTTP.
Yeah, XHTTP. I can't even remember like what the exact wording is.
Like, I want to say it's not Axios. It's not Axios.
No, that's a separate library. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I was literally like, oh God, I'm losing you. I forgot that I had on the browser. XHR, thank you. XHTTP request. That's it. XHR, XML HTTP request. That's the one. I'm deep in the MDN docs, and I'm like, man, I haven't seen this in 10 years.
Yeah. I remember when I was first learning web development, like trying to understand the difference between like an HTML form and an HTTP request, like exploded my brain. I was like, because I couldn't decouple them in my head because there was no fetch API. So it's like, it is the same. Like it's these tags. That's an HTTP request. It was so confusing. I'm so glad that we have some better APIs now. But
Yeah, I mean that's the way it had to be done before, and you really take fetch for granted. Now Node has fetch built in.
yeah, yeah, I was so happy when I saw that. For a long time, you had to use the node-fetch library, right? And now it's
Yeah, yeah, and
Language
then
Fusion.
if you wanted to do things in the browser, like make a library that was for the browser and for Node, you would have to like pass in a fetcher like as a
Yes.
parameter, so you could bring in the Node fetch for one and then use the browser fetch for the other. I was like, this is not the way. Most things with JavaScript we know aren't the way. We got getting a little sidetracked about why Rust's error handling is so great, but
Yeah, wait,
I
where
think
did
you
we
get
end
it.
up on that? So we got to errors as values. We I sent a tweet, a very provocative tweet. You responded with, "Hey, but you can do errors as values in Python. Look, here's how you do it." And then what?
Well, I think the biggest part of Rust, the best thing about Rust for me is error handling and the result enum in general, and an option, and the fact that you don't have null, you have some and none options, and you don't, like in Go, you have a convention to handle errors, right? And you pass the value and then you pass the error, and if the error isn't null, uh, then you handle that error. You return something else, or you just do something else, whatever you're gonna do. But you don't have to do that. Like you don't
Yeah.
have to do that. Nobody's making you do it. And the difference is that hand holding, and that's what again why I wonder if it really is, if Rust really is that bad for newcomers, because it will make you handle the error. But you
Yeah.
can't just use the value.
I feel like it has to be good. Like there's certain things I feel like we learn as programmers that are useful, and there are certain things we learn that just aren't. And it's like if we have a tool that makes our life easier, I feel like starting with that tool is perfectly fine. There's sometimes an argument to be made that like understanding why the tool exists is really important,
Yeah,
right?
and
So like understanding
that's why
why
I
the
was
borrow
learning
checker.
C.
Yeah.
And that's why I was learning C, because I was like, okay, I have to have an appreciation, for these things, like, and you really do gain that appreciation when you try to, dereference a null pointer, and
Don't do it.
it's just like, things that, but you're just like, why would this ever happen?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
at the same time, it gave me, doing a lot of the unsafe Rust and like doing some lower level um, programming and learning C in general, um, gave me an appreciation for C. And also, when I was doing some Zig stuff, gave me an appreciation for Zig as well, because it's much easier to manipulate and do things on a lower level than it is like with unsafe Rust, for instance. And I love using unsafe Rust for for fun, and and
What?
to see like, cause
That is a crazy admission to me. I love Unsafe Rust.
no, it's just like it's really fun for me to like see how far you can take things, like and it's like when you reach a performance limit at some point, and you're like, okay, are we at the performance limit? Like what if we just use raw pointers instead?
What
And
if we raw dog our pointers? Can we get a little faster? Okay. All
spoiler
right.
alert, it's faster, but
But at what cost, Travis? At what
yeah.
cost? What have you done?
Yeah, none of this is in production or in Crablang, on the record.
Okay, so you like Rust's error handling, and I don't we don't have to like beat this dead horse too much, because I actually think TJ and Prime have kind of explained error handling a little bit in their podcast episodes as well, so people can kind of catch up on that. Spoiler alert: Rust error handling is awesome, especially if you like the way Go does it. Rust does it a similar way but better. Is basically how I would like sum it up very quickly. What do you least like about Rust? This might be a harder question. And the foundation is not a valid answer.
Ah. What don't I like? I don't like explicit lifetimes. I don't like the syntax around explicit lifetimes, where you do like the apostrophe a, and keeping track of lifetimes. That would be my biggest my biggest. It's like once you start, say you want to have a reference to something in a struct, which would just be a pointer to something, um, then you have to give it a lifetime or static or something, an explicit lifetime. But say you realize that later on in your project, or you want to start. More common for me is I want to start optimizing, right? And then I'm like, okay, let's start using references instead of using clone and copying strings and cloning strings or anything like that, or especially with like vectors and slices, using slices instead. And so then you start going up the ladder, up your chain, and you want to start using references. So you add an explicit lifetime. Well, now you have every implementation that you've done, you have to specify that lifetime explicitly. And
Mm.
you have to add multiple different annotations for that lifetime. And it's
So
just, you just find yourself chasing down where you need to add them over and over. And then you get to the end and you realize this will never work.
that is like one of the worst types of issues in code is in coding is when you've like early on you're able to make a decision that seems good, and then you're able to waste hours and hours having made that decision only to finally realize that it was like the decision you made hours ago. That's So I totally
Yep.
get that. I've also just been
This
nodding.
never would have worked. Yeah.
I've also just been nodding along this whole time, pretending to know what explicit lifetimes are, and
You don't
trying
use
to pick it up
explicit
based on
lifetimes?
context. Look, I spoke at a Rust meetup about compiling Rust to WebAssembly. I have no goddamn idea what I'm doing in the language. Like I've opened up a Rust file like 10 times in my life. I'm such a wannabe. I'm Adam. I don't know if you guys know Adam Elmore. I am Adam when it comes to PHP. Like I just am a fanboy that kind of
You're
watches
really
from the
pushing for
sidelines.
it. We know it's great. I think it's really great. I've been told it's really great.
Those errors are really
Um,
good. Like trust me.
I would say, yeah, the compile times is a big one too. While we're griping, let's just let it all out. Compile times, and then we're like, there's this thing in the community and like this sense around Rust in general that like, oh, use a library, use a crate. You've been taught in npm that you don't want dependencies, but it's not that big of a deal in Rust. I've seen that posted.
Wait, hold on. People have been taught it's not a big deal to use. Why is node modules like 7,000 folders deep if people aren't using dependencies in npm?
Well, but no, well, there's the stigma around using the npm dependencies. It's like, people know you don't want too many npm dependencies, but
Okay.
for some reason they think Rust dependencies are just fine. They are not. they,
It's
I
the
mean,
same
like,
problem.
compile times and bringing in 15 different libraries. There's there's just, it takes so long to compile. Why would you want to, you know my gripe, I guess, is that like things like random aren't in the standard library. It's just so many things that, what Tokyo or Takayo, whatever you call it, it shouldn't be. It's so useful that it should be not called that.
It's like the async library, right? The IO async
Exactly. It's
thing.
exactly. It should be called async. It's confusing for people coming in. But yeah, I mean, like, I try to make things from scratch whenever I can because it's fun for me, but also because like you don't need most of the stuff you're pulling in with the crate, and also like, it's interesting to see how much of the stuff that is like very standard to do in a language that you need to reach for a crate for. It's like, you
Hmm.
want a random number? Crate.
Time to pull in some third party code.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
just that's frustrating to me.
That's interesting because Go is often characterized as, at least in my mind, one of the languages with like the strongest aversion to dependencies, right? I think it's Russ
Yeah,
Cox.
goes
Yeah,
good.
I think
Goes
Russ Cox like it was the one who wrote like a pretty famous blog post. It's like stop, like uh, stop adding all these
just
dependencies to your
stop.
project. I think it's Rob Pike who's like a little copying is better than a little dependency. Like there's just like a lot of these kinds of isms in the Go community.
Hmm.
And I'm actually like really surprised to hear that hasn't kind of permeated the Rust community, because I would argue Go and Rust have a lot of overlap in like
They
who's doing
do,
it.
they do, but it's like they shouldn't. They shouldn't. Like
Tell me
goes
why.
goes great at like at doing server stuff, and like it has specific modules for network related tasks, and it's just really great at that. And Rust is still building into that, it's still very young with it. And it's getting better, but it's just not, that's not the competing space, and people like to fight them out like they are. Like Go's
Yeah.
garbage collected, it's just not, we're not talking apples to apples. It's they weren't meant for the same things.
Yeah, I mean, I look at them as like they compete in completely different spheres. Now, Java, on the other hand, this is why I have it out for Java so much. It's like I really think Go can eat Java's lunch in a lot of domains, and mostly when I say a lot, I just mean backend development. Like,
Yeah, I would agree with that. I don't know if you know this, but I'm something of a Groovy developer myself. So, I've recently had to struggle with the JVM, and for the first time in, I don't know, 12 years, I think. And God, I hate
gonna
it.
need an F in the chat
Hate-
for that. Yeah.
God, I hate it so much. And now I've started this stupid interpreter on Prime's repo that I've done in Groovy, and I have to like finish it because I have to finish it, and I'm
Well,
like,
yeah.
oh my God, what have I done?
Otherwise, the startup TM isn't going to send your paycheck. You got to finish it.
That's right.
Oh man. Okay, we're on the same page there. I completely agree. Like Rust exists in the backend world, but it exists in a very small way in like the backend server world. I would argue it's mostly in like the high performance domains, like Discord famously switching a service to Rust, and at least from what I've seen, again having written approximately 10 files of Rust in my life, is that it excels more in the systems space where it kind of competes with C and maybe C++.
Yeah, I mean that's where it was meant, that's where it was meant to be. That said, it's like I love pushing it outside of that space. I love doing web stuff with it. I love trying to build applications with it, and building GUI apps with it, and doing all sorts of stuff. And I think the Towery project is really cool. And pushing the boundaries of what it can do. Um, but that's pushing the boundaries. It's not where it safely sits. It's not where it excels without any modification and without any coercing to make it work in that space.
Yeah, that's been my impression. Um, okay, I want to move on a little bit and talk kind of reposition the kind of last section of our podcast here, to talk about freelancing. So it's not often that I have someone on the podcast that's done a lot of freelancing. I've talked to a lot of people that have worked at like FANG companies, right? A couple people that have worked at Netflix, at Twitch, had been able to kind of
Universal
speak
Music, by the way.
to what's that?
Universal Music, by the way.
Universal Music, by the way. You work at Universal Music, by the way?
That's where I work now. Did you not know that?
No.
I say it.
Um. Anyway, so I've talked to all these people that work at these big companies, but very few have I been able to talk to that have been able to kind of speak to the freelancing side. Especially to keep in mind that people listening to this podcast probably haven't gotten their first developer job yet. They're very early on in their coding career. Maybe some of them are trying to decide if they should start freelancing, if they should start a startup, if they should go get a job as a backend developer. tell me a little bit about your experience freelancing. Did you like it? Did you not like it? Why?
So I loved it. I loved freelancing. Going to like making your own startup, freelancing, like having a corporate job. I've done all three of them, and I've dissolved my businesses. They were not successful. Well, the last one technically was, but the last one I was just freelancing, but I learned to have an LLC, so it's still freelancing essentially.
Yeah.
Um, but I highly recommend, like, if you're waiting, trying to get your first job, just simultaneously be looking for freelance work, and you can raise your value based on that. You can really freelancing really broadened my skill set. I used Upwork for all that, and I don't know, it's been a while, so I don't know if things have changed, if it's still a good platform or what. I don't want to recommend it or anything like that, but it was hard. It's always hard to get your first clients, right? But there's so many platforms where you can showcase your skills and showcase different projects on that, might be niche or niche, however you say it. But that, someone like needs a Wix site or a WordPress site or you know like you can look for your specific stack or technology that you want to learn or are learning. And like the sheer variety of jobs, they're not all going to be good. Just to get
Yeah.
that right out.
Yeah. So did you start
If you like
freelance?
need money,
Sorry.
if you
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
yeah, if you like need money, then you're going to do some jobs you just
Yeah.
don't like, especially right off the bat. But there's just so much money out there, in freelancing, and I became very, very niche. I guess it's just my thing to be incredibly niche.
There's an advantage to that.
But I was the PHP. I was making $100 an hour writing PHP, and it started out doing like $35 an hour, and then as I got clients, just kept raising the price because like I couldn't take anybody on unless the value was there.
Right.
So I wasn't just like jacking my prices to for no reason because I like money. But it's like, what you decide, okay, I'm full up right now. Like, if someone wanted me to work on the project, what would be the amount of money that I would have to charge to justify dropping a client, or not necessarily dropping, but weaning off a client.
Well, I mean, the natural like market that exists for a freelancer is basically one of an auction, right? Like you kind of over time are essentially auctioning your time to your clients. And I know it's not like quite
Yeah.
that cutthroat, but I mean, like
No,
that is what's happening, right?
arguably.
Yeah. Yeah, you have a client. And it's
Arguably.
like, I have another client over here that's going to pay me twice as much. Like my next project, I'm probably
I'm
going to have to drop you and take that, right? Like,
Yeah, I was working for a client, and eventually he wanted me to be, wanted to go exclusive, and I was like, okay.
wanted to go
um,
steady.
yeah, exactly. I was like, here's what we got to do. And I wanted to be W-2 and get benefits because I had kids and stuff, but it just wasn't going to work out like that. And I was like, okay, I have to charge you more money. And then Universal opportunity came up, and it's a hard conversation, but I was like, I can't turn that down. And he was
Yeah.
super understanding. He's also a musician, so that helped probably. He's like, I'd probably take it too, to be honest.
I've never
So
understood employers that get upset when someone leaves. Like,
I think that if you know your boss is going to get upset when you leave, if you, as long, of course, if you have a good relationship and you're doing it, you're not just leaving. But that's it's a definite red flag if like they'd be upset, then there's something else going on. They're probably not a good employer to begin with.
yeah. And let me be clear, like, there's a difference between disappointed and angry, right? Like, you probably want your
Yeah, I mean,
employer
he
to
was
be
definitely
disappointed when
disappointed.
you leave. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Like, that
he
means
was
you did
definitely
a good job.
disappointed. And
Yeah.
like, I felt bad because, he's talking about some projects and some things that I was excited to work on, um and using newer technologies. And I was like, oh man, I'm, I'm
How am I
so,
gonna
I'm so
tell him?
sorry, dude.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
That
tough,
sounds
man.
really great for you.
Career talks are, in my experience, just as hard as like relationship talks sometimes,
Oh yeah,
right?
absolutely. I
Um,
mean, like it's a relationship, especially when you build them with clients. People talk about clients, relationships, and I talk to people, my friends about this. Like, you are in relationships. They're all very hard. They all have very much the same difficulties, the same problems, whether they are romantic or otherwise. They are still relationships, and that's there's gonna be tough talks.
yeah, yeah, for sure. I think like not burning bridges, being super perfect. Like there's a bunch of stuff you can just kind of do that will, you'll have a much better time. Uh,
Yeah,
but that doesn't mean it's going to be easy, right?
yeah, it's definitely not going to be easy, but like I said, if you do things right and you're respectful and you talk to your employer or your client and they blow up still, then you've just confirmed that
Yeah.
are making the right move.
I want to tell a story really quick because I think this is actually hopefully going to be really valuable. I was talking to a student who'd completed boot dev recently. Well, it was probably 6 months ago, and he was asking me because he just landed an unpaid internship. If so he landed an unpaid internship and got a job offer. Uh, so he's working at the unpaid internship for like a month or two, and he gets a job offer that's paid, right? And he's asking me, he's like, I don't know if I can leave this unpaid internship. Like, they'll be so disappointed that I'm leaving, right? I've made this commitment to them. I'm like, no, please, God, like, they will
Nah.
understand. They will be happy for you. They're not paying you. Like,
Uh,
go take the
God.
paid job. Like,
Yes. Yes. If they
but
are
that is a
anything
headspace that people
close
get
to
into.
reasonable people, they will be very happy for you. In fact,
Yeah.
this is what they want to see happen for you.
Yeah. Nobody brings on unpaid interns with like, well, no reasonable person brings on unpaid interns with an expectation of getting like crazy value from their unpaid interns, right?
Yeah,
It's
I
more
mean,
of
I
like
mean, what you
maybe we'll
want.
be able to train you up.
The only justification for unpaid interns is that if you have something in your business where you can teach really valuable skills and make them excited about a career, and then either start paying them a lot of money or have prepared this person who is otherwise unemployable for employment elsewhere. That's the only
Yeah,
justification. Um,
completely agree. And I don't even believe in unpaid internships. So I have
yeah, I
one
mean,
employee at
again,
Boot Dev.
I,
Yeah,
I don't believe in unpaid anything.
yeah. It doesn't make sense.
That's why I
I
do
have one
crab.
employee, Alan. What's that?
That's why I do crabling for the money.
For the money. Good lord. That's why I do open source for the donations.
That's right.
uh, okay. Man, this has been an awesome talk. We've been going for quite a while. I have one last question that I want to ask you about freelancing, because I think it'll be really valuable. Um, to set up for that, did you start as a freelancer or did you start as like a W-2 employee when you started learning to code?
Hmm. It's been so many years. Um, I started in like a design capacity, and um, and I was just doing odd jobs. I wouldn't call it freelancing back then, but in my first development role, um, I was in Panama City. Well, I lived in Pensacola actually. I was driving to Panama City to make $17 an hour, and it's 2 hour drive.
Oh Lord. Okay.
Yeah, and yeah, like so the my boss was really cool. Um, he was actually the bass player for the Allman Brothers, um, for period of time, and was an awesome musician, and so it was worth it for me. That's why I did it. But um, but yeah, then I started like switching between freelancing and like using any time I had that was extra to learn some skills, and and then people really just started coming to me for this. Sounds super, strike this whole section. I don't like how this is going to come off, but people just started coming to me for work because they were they heard about me through someone else, or they heard about me through like another band. Like I was doing band websites, and then I started doing like e-commerce for a startup, and I was doing like outdoor. I got really even more niche into like this outdoor space. And I don't know if you know anything about me, um, but I am not an outdoors guy. But uh, that like I was all is all outdoor recreational vehicles, and like all this like modified golf carts and RV parts and stuff like that. It's just like I don't even know how I got into this space. But that's like just hopping from like company to company on referral for them, like not really doing W2. um I did for a couple of them, and then I worked for this company that called Chargebacks 911 that like handles chargebacks automatically. It's pretty evident what they do. um and I've been between like corporate jobs, getting sick of corporate culture, going back to freelancing, deciding that I actually want to start my own company. But I feel like that cycle has ended a lot since I've because I have a wife and kids now. It's just yeah, you don't have that. I don't have that freedom to just like give the old "f you," I quit.
Yeah, I feel that. I feel that. Um, okay. So with that context in mind, um, I love bringing people on the show occasionally because they will disagree with me, which I actually think is great because I have a lot of students kind of, learning from me on boot dev, and I actually get concerned that they're listening to me too much. And I want them to listen to some other people sometimes. So one thing I say a lot is like, I think for most backend developers, new backend developers, it's easier to go get a W2 position than to strike out as a freelancer. Uh, Primarily because you can focus on the engineering side and less on like the getting client side. But I would love to hear, like, genuinely, I would love to hear the case for freelancing as a new person, and maybe if you have like one or two tips for someone who like kind of knows that they want to get into the freelancing space.
I would say that my biggest thing against that is when you go into if you get a W2 position, you're going to be using whatever technology they are using on their team already. Whether or not that technology is good, the best technology for the job, or has a future in the space is irrelevant. You're going to be using it, and you're going to be getting really good at it. And you might find yourself, with these COBOL skills that you just can't take anywhere. And whereas, like I said, in freelance, there are a lot of startups, ready to use new technologies, and there are a lot of companies that just using a broad variety of technologies, um, and you can pick and kind of choose the space you want to be in more. Because I'll be honest, like I don't I don't love e-commerce. I don't love JavaScript, but here I am. I don't love PHP. That's a lie, but here I am. With these skills that have proven to be the most valuable, that continue my career, that aren't the things that make me the happiest.
That's great advice. Thank you so much for coming on, man. Where can
Yeah,
everybody find you online?
you know, like I'm on Twitter. I'm on Twitter. I'm on the Thritter.
Thritter.
It's TechSavvyTravvy everywhere. Twitch, TechSavvyTravvy. Twitter, TechSavvyTravvy. Thritter, TechSavvyTravvy. GitHub, not TechSavvyTravvy. It's TRVSWGNR.
Good Lord. All right. I'll link that shit in the
Legacy.
description. There's no way.
And also crablang.org if you want crablang things. I don't really have a lot to shill. They pay me money. I don't really need your money.
You already have Lambos from PHP and forking Rust. You don't need
That's right.
the peasants' money. Yeah.
Yeah, man. I
I love it.
appreciate you having me, though. This has been great.